Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that gives you that shortcut to being, well, truly well-informed. Today we're digging into a really major work, Bertrand Russell's A History of Western Philosophy. And if you're thinking, oh great, a dry history book, think again. Russell himself, he argued philosophy isn't just some dusty academic thing. He saw it as this living reality, deeply tied into history, politics, religion, science. Basically the fabric of society. It's like the intellectual compass for civilization.
Absolutely. And what makes Russell's take so unique is he's not just reporting, he's engaging, critiquing. He offers this sharp commentary, which really turns the whole book into a kind of philosophical conversation itself. So in this deep dive, we're going to explore how he dissects these huge ideas, starting way back in ancient Greece and then moving right through the medieval period.
Okay, so the mission for you listening in is to pull out the most crucial insights from Russell's viewpoint. We're not just asking what these philosophers thought, we want to know why it mattered, and, really importantly, how Russell, a giant philosopher himself, saw their contributions, and also where he thought they went wrong. All right, let's start this journey right at the beginning, ancient Greek philosophy.
Yeah, so Russell, he had this real admiration for those very early thinkers, people like Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. What he found so groundbreaking with their shift. They moved away from explaining the world through myths, gods and stuff, towards rational inquiry. They were asking, what's reality really made of? It laid the groundwork for, well, both science and philosophy, even if their ideas seem, like Russell said, a bit simple and sometimes crude now. That intellectual bravery.
Foundational.
Right, that courage to just ask why, based on reason. So after them, we get to Socrates. What made him such a builder of philosophy for Russell? Well, Russell really praised Socrates on several fronts. His intellectual depth, his moral backbone, and definitely his argumentative style. He highlighted how Socrates' method, asking question after question, the Socratic method, was all about pushing people to the limits of their own assumptions. It was like a symbol of intellectual freedom. And what Russell found really key was how Socrates brought philosophy down from the heavens to earth, made it relevant to everyday human life, to ethics.
Okay, now Plato. This is where it gets really interesting, doesn't it? Russell saw his greatness, but he also had some pretty sharp critiques.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating tension. Russell fully acknowledged Plato's literary and intellectual greatness. You can't deny the sheer scale of his thought. But he took major issue with Plato's theory of forms. The idea of this perfect, unchanging realm of ideal concepts existing beyond our senses. Russell saw it as this great intellectual construction, sure, but, and this is crucial for Russell, with limited practical applicability. It kind of raises the question Russell often implicitly asks, what's the point of a beautiful theory if it doesn't really help us understand or navigate the actual world we live in?
So it needed to be grounded for Russell.
Exactly. And this ties into his other big criticism of Plato, the political ideas, specifically the philosopher king from the Republic. This idea that society should be ruled by these supposedly enlightened philosopher elites. Russell saw that as basically tyranny, a serious constraint on individual freedom, which makes sense given Russell's whole life was dedicated to, individual liberty and democracy. He was deeply skeptical of concentrated, unchecked power.
Okay, so harsh words for Plato on some key points. What about Aristotle then? Did Russell find similar problems, or was his view different?
His view of Aristotle was, let's say, more balanced, mixed, but generally leaning positive. He definitely pointed out flaws, or what he called some flawed hypothetical logic in Aristotle's arguments sometimes. But he hugely admired Aristotle's intellectual breadth, his incredible ability to classify and organize knowledge, his systematic thought. Just the sheer scope was amazing. And maybe Aristotle's greatest strength, in Russell's eyes, was his ability to combine philosophy with actual scientific observation, that blend of abstract thinking and looking at the real world.
That grounding element again.
Right. And Russell points to works like metaphysics, ethics, politics, poetics as just monumental achievements. He also looked closely at Aristotle's scientific ideas, placing them in their historical context, and importantly, showing how they massively influenced later medieval Christian thought.
So we move out of that golden age of Greece. Did philosophy keep going down that same path of rational inquiry, or did things change as we get into the Roman and later Greek periods?
Things definitely shifted. The focus changed quite a bit. With thinkers like the Stoics and the Epicureans, the spotlight really turned towards ethics. How should one live?
Right. Tell us about Stoicism through Russell's lens.
Okay, Stoicism. Russell noted its emphasis on things like personal discipline, accepting what you can't change, acceptance of fate, and emotional control. He saw value there. for developing moral steadfastness, particularly when life gets tough. But critically, he also pointed out their limited practical utility, especially when Stoic ideas seem to encourage just being quiet and passive about social injustice or political oppression. For Russell, that was a major drawback. Philosophy shouldn't lead to quietism in the face of wrong.
Okay, that makes sense. A kind of inward focus that might neglect the outward world.
Sort of, yeah. And Epicureanism, though also focused on ethics, went a different way, emphasizing pleasure, though more like tranquility and avoiding pain as the goal. Russell likely saw both as attempts to build ethical systems without relying on dogma, but perhaps ones that didn't fully engage with broader societal responsibilities in the way he thought necessary.
Right, which brings us neatly to a period where Russell's critical faculties seem particularly engaged. Medieval Christian philosophy.
Oh, absolutely. This is where Russell really digs in. He spent a lot of time examining that intricate, often tense relationship between religious faith and philosophical reason, especially looking at major figures like St. Augustine and later Thomas Aquinas.
And what was his main takeaway from that era?
Well, according to Russell, medieval philosophy was constantly trying to juggle logic and revelation, trying to make them fit together. But, he argued, more often than not, it ended up subordinating reason to religion. Reason had to fit within the box defined by faith. And for Russell, a champion of free, objective inquiry, that was just unacceptable. It put limits on where thought could go.
So how did he view someone like St. Augustine?
He acknowledged Augustine as a deep and intellectually complex thinker. There's no denying his influence. But Russell also leveled some harsh criticism at core Augustinian ideas, like the concept of human inherent sinfulness, the idea that we're all born fundamentally flawed. This really clashed with Russell's more optimistic view of human potential and the power of reason to improve things. He wasn't buying into innate corruption guided only by divine grace.
Okay, and Thomas Aquinas. He famously tried to synthesize Aristotle with Christian doctrine. How did Russell see that effort?
He definitely appreciated the scale and intellect behind Aquinas' project trying to harmonize Aristotle with Christianity. That was a monumental task. But ultimately, Russell found the harmony often artificial. He felt Aquinas sometimes had to bend either Aristotle or Christian doctrine or both to make them fit. And doing that for Russell was contrary to philosophical freedom. It wasn't a free inquiry seeking truth wherever it led. It was kind of aiming for a predetermined conclusion. It loops back to his constant concern for intellectual autonomy, for letting reason go where it will without religious constraints.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a huge sweep there. From the very first sparks of rational thought in Greece, through Plato and Aristotle, the ethical turn, and into that complex medieval mix of faith and reason, all through Bertrand Russell's, well, very critical eyes.
Exactly. And what we've seen is Russell isn't just a historian telling us what happened. He's right in there, arguing with these thinkers, challenging their assumptions. He's constantly poking at the practical implications, or sometimes the lack thereof, of these really big, grand philosophical systems.
Yeah, this deep dive really highlights that constant thread in Russell. His search for intellectual freedom, his deep skepticism of any system, be it political or religious, that tries to put limits on human reason or individual liberty.
So wrapping up this first part of our look at Russell's history of Western philosophy, what really stands out maybe for you, the listener, too? Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do these ancient medieval tensions, between pure reason and practical use, between individual freedom and the needs of society, between logic and deeply held beliefs, how do they still play out and shape our world right now? Especially as we face completely new challenges, new ways information flows. It's still relevant, isn't it?